There's a lot more the UN does to make our world a better place. There's education, gender equality, and now the Sustainable Development Goals. Ms. Kayanja tells us more.
So why do you think that nations have found it difficult to recognize the role the women play in economic development up until a few years ago?
It's not actually true to say that the UN has just recognized the importance of women. The UN was formed in 1945, and in that same year, the first sort of study that was conducted, and in fact, it culminated into the first department related to women issues. That study was to study the concerns of women. That was as way back in 1945, the concerns of the issues of development as they affect women. That was one of the first studies carried out by the United Nations. So the UN has been concerned about the plight of the equality of women from then. You've had the decade of women in the 80s, then you had the Beijing actions in 1994, and all through up to now. And we've made a lot of progress. The UN has had various departments on women issues. Now we have one consolidated, very important agency, the UN Women, which we used to have UNIFEM and many other smaller organizations working on women issues. Now it has been consolidated into a strong agency. Not only that, it's not just that we are talking, but also in the way the United Nations Secretariat works. You have now many senior women working as in the leadership of the United Nations. That is why we are pushing a lot on gender. One of the Sustainable Development Goals is on gender equality. So the issue of gender, the issue of women is so key to our operations in the United Nations. We know there's no way you can improve the governance of the country. There's no way you can eradicate poverty without giving equal opportunity to boys and girls, men and women. So for us, it's not new in the UN. What I can say is that I'm so happy with the progress. You know, there are many countries where women were not even allowed to vote. There are many countries where women would not go to school. They would take the boys to school and not the girls. We still see disparities in the workplace, in schooling, and so on between men and women. That's why we must continue the campaign. But there's a lot of progress that has been made. And I wouldn't say that we have only increased our operations to empower women in the last few years. This has been going on. And, you know, when you have a movement, it generates its own momentum. The movement that started in the 40s generated momentum that led to the decade of women, generated the momentum that came into Beijing and after Beijing. So the movement is becoming stronger. And that's why you see more women in leadership. You see more women in all spheres of development. It's because this has been moving, it has been moving. And I'm sure that all those countries where you still have big disparities related to religion and cultural factors, those ones will be broken. And as we say, we are hoping that because gender equality is one of the goals in the Sustainable Development Goals. By 2030, we'll see even better improvement.
And just recently, the UN celebrated the International Day of the Rural Women. Why the focus on rural women?
Oh, this came about after, okay, we talk a lot about women. There was this feeling that sometimes when you talk about women empowerment and so on, we talk about probably more the elite, urban women who have a voice, who can speak, who have the platforms. But we also know that probably, especially in the developing world, most of the women, the largest population of women are in rural areas. And they are the most important producers of food. And that's why actually the UN put the commemoration of the International Day of Rural Women on 15th, because on 16th we have the World Food Day. The point is that you have to celebrate the producers of food before you celebrate the food. One of the reasons we do that is because we want to draw the attention of the world to the importance of women in rural areas. So that as you talk about women, like you've been saying, women in high places in the UN, women in high places in government, that is important. But you should also remember this problems women in the rural areas face. They don't have access to land, they don't have access to a number of resources, many of them are illiterate, How can you pull them up? And you also have to recognize their contribution to society, as I've said, especially the production of food, looking after the children. If you are going to talk about the health of children, the nutrition of children, it is these women who are going to change those statistics. We need to empower them. We need to give them more information. We need to support them. Countries are actually, because of, again, of this awareness, in many countries there have been new initiatives on how to give them credit without collateral, because the lady doesn't have access to land, or which she could use as collateral. You can have ways of giving her credit so that she can develop herself, produce more food, and so on. That's why we need this focus on them as a productive sector, as individuals, also focusing on their rights. Because, as I said, there was this thinking that sometimes when you talk about women, we have the International Day of Women, which is 8th March. Some people think it's more elitist, the women in the towns, the women in the high places. So that's why we should focus also on these women. So it is also part of the same movement of gender equality.
This is where we end the program this week. Please tell us how you're helping the world become a better place on any of our social media platforms. I am Amarat Shiobani, and may the week you have started be a peaceful blue.